Mm. My father looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're a man. Figure it out." That was the last real conversation we had before I packed a single duffel bag and walked out of the house I grew up in. I was 18 years old. I had $43 in my pocket, a phone that was about to be shut off, and absolutely no idea what came next. What I did know, what I had known for years, if I'm being honest, was that I was never the child my parents were proud of. That role belonged to my sister. It always had. My name is Carter. I'm 31 now. I own a small construction company in Columbus, Ohio. I have a wife named Dana, who is the most grounded person I've ever met, and we have a 3-year-old son named James who laughs so loud it fills every room in our house. I tell you this not to brag. I tell you this because for a long time I genuinely did not believe any of it was possible for someone like me. Someone who'd been told in 100 different ways that he wasn't worth the investment. This is the story of how I found that out. Lived through it and what happened 7 years later at my sister's baby shower when my mother said something in front of 15 people that she can never take back. I grew up in a suburb outside of Nashville. My parents. My father ran a mid-sized landscaping business. My mother worked part-time in a dental office. Weren't rich, but they weren't struggling either. We had a decent house, 2 cars, vacations to the beach every other summer. From the outside, we looked like a perfectly normal family. My sister Renee is 4 years older than me. She was the kind of kid adults describe as effortless. Good grades without appearing to study. Popular without appearing to study. Popular without appearing to try. Pretty in a way that made strangers stop and compliment my mother. My parents loved Renee the way you love something you're proud you made. They showed her off. They talked about her at dinner parties. They framed her report cards. I was the other one. I don't say that with self-pity anymore. I've done enough work on myself to say it plainly, like a fact. The sky's blue. Nashville gets humid in July. I was the other one. I was quieter than Renee, more internal, the kind of kid who took things apart to see how they worked and didn't always put them back together neatly. I got decent grades, not exceptional ones. I didn't cause trouble, but I wasn't impressive in the ways my parents valued. My father used to say I needed to find my drive. He said it the way you'd say someone needed to find their glasses, like it was a small, fixable problem, and the failure to fix it was a personal choice. What I understand now, that I didn't understand then, is that some parents decide early which child is the investment and which one is the afterthought. It's not always conscious. It's 1,000 tiny decisions. Who gets signed up for the better extracurriculars? Who gets the car on weekends? Who gets their college application proofread that accumulate over years into something that shapes a person completely? For Renee, every door was opened. For me, every door had a sign that said, "Figure it out yourself." Junior year of high school, Renee came home from her first year at Vanderbilt for Thanksgiving. She sat at the table glowing, talking about her classes, her friends, her professors who loved her. My parents watched her like she was a movie they'd been waiting years to see. I sat across the table and ate my green beans and thought, that's going to be me in 2 years. I had started researching schools. I'd found a civil engineering program in Ohio State that looked incredible. I'd been looking at financial aid forms. I had a plan. After dinner, I brought it up. I waited until Renee had gone to catch up with her high school friends, until the dishes were done, until my mother had her coffee and my father had settled into his chair. I laid it out as clearly as I could. Ohio State. Engineering. I'd need help with tuition. My father didn't even let me finish. He set his coffee mug down, leaned back, and said, "You're a man, Carter. You need to learn to be independent. We're not going to hand everything to you." I remember the specific stillness of that moment, the clock on the wall, the way my mother looked at the table instead of at me. I said, "You paid for Renee's school?" My father said, "Renee earned it." I asked what I had to do to earn it. He said, "That's the wrong question. The right question is what you're going to do for yourself." I sat with that for a second. Then I said, very quietly, "She got the same grades I did junior year. She got a B in AP chemistry. I got an A." My mother finally looked up. She said, "This isn't a competition." But it was. It had always been. I just hadn't been told I was losing. I went upstairs, sat on my bed, and stared at the ceiling for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and started looking at community colleges with night programs. and which construction companies in Nashville were hiring 18-year-olds. I didn't bring it up again. I didn't beg. I didn't perform sadness hoping they'd feel guilty. I recorded the conversation on my phone before I came back downstairs for it. Something in me had known I would need to remember it exactly as it happened, not the softened version I'd eventually convince myself of if I let time pass. I saved it in a folder and I left it alone. The day after graduation, I packed my duffel bag. The first 2 years were the kind of hard that you don't talk about in detail because it sounds like complaint. I worked construction during the day and took classes at night. I ate a lot of peanut butter. I had a room in a house with 4 other guys where the heat didn't always work. I called my parents twice, once to tell them I was safe, once to Christmas because it felt wrong not to. Both conversations lasted under 10 minutes. My mother asked if I was eating. My father asked if I'd figured things out yet, in a tone that suggested he expected the answer to be no. I didn't tell them I was doing okay. I didn't need them to know yet. At 22, I had my contractor's license. At 24, I had 3 regular clients and a small crew. At 26, I incorporated. The business grew slowly, then steadily, then in a way that started to feel real and lasting. I was good at the work. I'd always been good at understanding how things were built, how they fit together, what they needed to hold. It turned out that was a skill worth something. I met Dana at 27 at a mutual friend's birthday. She was an occupational therapist, practical and funny, and completely unimpressed by people who tried too hard. On our 3rd date, she asked about my family, and I told her the short version. She listened without interrupting, which almost no one does. And then she said, "Do you want them back in your life?" Not in a leading way, not the way therapists ask things that already have the answer built in. She genuinely wanted to know what I wanted. I said I honestly didn't know. She said, "That's a good place to start." We got married 2 years later. Small ceremony, 20 people. My parents were not invited. Dana's family welcomed me the way families in movies welcome people, genuinely, loudly, with food. Her father shook my hand and told me I was good for his daughter and meant it. I stood in their backyard at the rehearsal dinner and felt something I didn't have a word for at the time. I think the word is witnessed. My sister Renee got pregnant at 32. I found out through a cousin who still had me on social media. I didn't reach out. We hadn't spoken in 5 years. Not because of a single fight, but because we'd simply become strangers who shared a history neither of us wanted to discuss. She had her own life, her husband Marcus, a nice house in Franklin. She was fine. I was fine. We were fine separately. What I didn't expect was the phone call from my mother 8 months into Renee's pregnancy. I was in the truck, driving back from a job site. I saw her name on the screen and I sat with it for 3 rings before I answered. She opened with small talk, which was how I knew something was coming. My mother only made small talk when she wanted something. She asked about Dana, about work, and then she said she and my father were throwing a baby shower for Renee, and they'd really like me to come. I said, "Mom." She said, "I know it's been a while." I said, "It's been 5 years." She said, "Your father and I have been doing a lot of thinking." I waited. She said they'd realized some things, that things could have been handled differently, that they'd like a chance to move forward as a family. She did not say sorry. Not once in that conversation did the word sorry appear. I told her I'd think about it. I hung up, sat in the parking lot of a lumber yard for 15 minutes, and called Dana. Dana asked me the same question she'd asked on our 3rd date. "What do you want?" I thought about my son James, who was 2 at the time, who was at home probably trying to feed his dinner to the dog. I thought about the recording on my phone that I still hadn't deleted. I thought about the version of myself that was 18 and sitting on a bed staring at the ceiling. I said, "I want to go. I want to look them in the eye." Dana said, "Then we'll go." The baby shower was on a Saturday in April. Renee in Marcus's house, 15 people in the living room, pastel decorations, little sandwiches on trays. The kind of normal domestic gathering that is almost impossible to be miserable in, which I suspected was part of the point. Dana held my hand in the car on the way over. Not the way you hold someone's hand when you're nervous. The way you hold someone's hand when you want them to know you're there. We walked in, and my mother was the first person I saw. She looked older. Not in a bad way, just genuinely older the way people do, when 5 years actually pass. She hugged me in the doorway, and I let her, and it felt like hugging someone I used to know very well, and now knew only by outline. My father shook my hand. He said, "Good to see you, son." He said it the way people say things they've practiced. Renee hugged me and seemed genuinely surprised I'd come, which told me everything I needed to know about what she'd expected. She looked happy and tired in the way of very pregnant people. I congratulated her. I meant it. For the first hour, everything was careful and civil. People ate sandwiches. Someone played a game where you had to guess the baby food flavor. I stood next to Dana and made conversation with Renee's mother-in-law, who was funny and warm and didn't know anything about our family history, which made her the easiest person in the room to talk to. And then it was time for Renee to open gifts. Dana and I had brought something practical. A good stroller, the kind you actually use, not the kind that looks impressive in photos. My mother had organized the gift table, which I noticed the moment I walked in. She had arranged everything by size. She had made little name tags. It was the kind of thing she did, organized, presentational, the hostess who makes everything look effortless so everyone knows how much effort she put in. Renee opened gifts one by one, reading the cards out loud, thanking people. It was the usual choreography of these things. People oohed at the tiny shoes. Someone made a comment about how fast they grow. Then Renee picked up our gift. She read the card. Dana had written something sweet about welcoming the baby into the family. Renee smiled and looked up at me, and in that moment I saw something flicker in her face. Something that looked almost like guilt. That was when my mother spoke. She was standing across the room near the kitchen doorway, holding her glass of sparkling water. She said it conversationally, the way you'd comment on the weather. Not yelling, not even particularly dramatic. She said, "I still can't believe Carter actually came. I told your father, this is the one who left, walked right out on all of us, and now here he is, like nothing happened." The room went quiet in that specific way. Rooms go quiet when something has been said that cannot be unsaid. I felt Dana's hand find my arm. I did not move. My mother kept going, the way people do when silence feels like permission. She said, "We gave him every opportunity. Everything we gave Renee, we offered to Carter. He just never wanted to put the work in. So we left." I watched 15 people look at me and then look away. And then Marcus, Renee's husband, a man I had met exactly twice before that day, set down his drink and said very clearly, "That's not what Renee told me." My mother blinked. Marcus said, "Renee told me you didn't pay for Carter's school, that you paid for hers and told him to figure it out himself. That's what she told me when we got engaged because she said I should know the full picture of her family." He looked at my mother without flinching. "So I'm a little confused about what opportunities you're referring to." The silence was a different kind now. My mother said, "That's a mischaracterization." Marcus said, "Is it?" My father from the corner of the room said nothing. He looked at his shoes. Renee was still holding our gift. Her face had gone the particular red of someone who is trying not to cry, and also trying not to say anything they can't take back in front of 14 other people. I looked at my mother and I said, calm and clear, "I have the conversation recorded, the one where Dad told me to be independent while you looked at the table. I've had it for 13 years. I kept it because I knew. I think I always knew that someday someone would tell a different version of it." I paused. "You don't have to believe me, but Marcus does because Renee told him the truth, and Renee told him the truth because she was there." My mother opened her mouth. I said, "I didn't come here for an apology. I came because Renee is having a baby and she's my sister and I wanted to try, but I won't stand in a room full of people and let you rewrite what happened." I picked up my jacket from the back of the chair. Dana stood up beside me without being asked. I said to Renee, "Congratulations. I mean that." And I did. We left. In the car, Dana didn't say anything for the first few minutes. Then she reached over and put her hand on mine. She said, "You okay?" I thought about it honestly. I said, "Yeah, I actually am." And I was. That surprised me. I'd expected to feel wrung out, shaky, the way you feel after you've been holding your breath for a long time. Instead, I felt something closer to still. Like a room after furniture's been moved out of it. More space than before. 2 days later, Renee called me. It was the longest conversation we'd had in 10 years. She cried for part of it. She said she was sorry. Not for my parents, not explaining them away. Just sorry. Sorry she hadn't said something sooner. Sorry she'd let years go by without picking up the phone. She said she'd always known it wasn't fair, and she'd been too comfortable with her own life to do anything about it, and she wasn't proud of that. I told her I wasn't looking to relitigate everything. I told her I had a son she hadn't met, and a wife who was better than I deserved, and a life I'd built from nothing, and I was proud of it. I told her if she wanted to be part of that going forward, I was open to it, slowly, carefully, on honest terms. She said she'd like that. My parents have not called since the shower. My mother sent a text 3 weeks later that said, "I hope you know we love you," with no additional context. I read it, set my phone down, and went back to playing trucks on the living room floor with James. I don't hate my parents. I want to be clear about that because it matters. Hating them would require me to still be waiting for something from them, and I'm not waiting anymore. They made their choices when I was young enough that it shaped me in ways I spent years untangling, and they are still making their choices now, and those choices are theirs to live with. What I know? What I want to say clearly to anyone watching this who is still in the middle of their own version of this is that the people who are supposed to choose you and didn't are not the final word on your worth. They are not the authority. They lost that when they abdicated the responsibility that came with it. I built something real. Not to prove anything to them, I let go of that around 25 when I realized they weren't watching anyway. I built it because it turned out I was capable of more than anyone in that house had ever expected of me. Maybe more than I'd expected of myself. My father told me to figure it out. I did. I just figured out something different than what he meant. That I didn't need his version of success, his approval, or his revised history. I needed to know my own story well enough that no one in a room full of people could tell it wrong without me being able to set the record straight. James turned 3 last month. We had a party at the house, Dana's parents, a few close friends, a cake with a fire truck on it because that is currently the only thing that matters to him. He ran around the backyard in his little sneakers, getting frosting on everything, and at one point he ran up to me out of nowhere, grabbed my leg with both arms, looked up at me, and said, "Daddy, watch me," before sprinting back toward the swings. I watched him. That's what choosing your child looks like. That's the whole thing. It's not complicated. I watched my son run across the grass in the afternoon light, and I thought, this is what I was building toward, through all of it. Not revenge, not a moment in a living room where someone finally said sorry, just this. Just a backyard and a kid who expects you to watch because he has never once had reason to believe you wouldn't. I kept that recording for 13 years. I don't know if I'll ever delete it, but I haven't listened to it in 4. I don't need to anymore.